Okay, so I'm Jack Rain, and I'm going over the first section of dietary analysis. Um, so, you as the client identified yourself as a 22-year-old male who takes part at county level tennis, and you identified your weight at 72 kilograms and your height 183 centimeters. Um, you identified that you train for 8 to 10 hours a week across a period of about 3 to 5 different training sessions weekly. Okay, so for or due to the reason of tennis being such a competitive and high demand sport, it is important for all competitors, whether that's amateur, county and regional level, and even professional, to have a healthy, balanced diet in order to perform at their highest efficiency or the highest demand. Um, and energy is supplied by nutrition, and therefore enhances the reason of being so important for a competitor to have the right diet. And nutrition is broken down into macronutrients, which there are three main categories, and that's the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, which Ross and David will go over in more detail in their sections. There are three main energy systems involved with the body. And the first energy system is the ATP-PC system, or the adenosine triphosphate and phosphocreatine system. And in this energy system, the enzyme creatine kinase is used to separate a phosphate and creatine molecule. And the energy that is released from this reaction is used to bind the phosphate molecule to adenosine diphosphate molecule, which then leads to adenosine triphosphate molecule with three phosphate molecules, which is used for energy. And it's also noted that the ATP-PC system focuses on fast twitch muscle fibers and only allows enough energy for about 10 seconds of maximal effort exercise. Okay, so the second energy system is the glycolytic system, and in this system, glycogen is synthesized from glucose through the process glycogenolysis. And this forms pyruvic acid, which is then turned into lactic acid to provide energy. And like the ATP-PC system, this system works in the absence of oxygen and only supplies energy for approximately 1 to 2 minutes of exercise. So the final energy system is the oxidative system, and unlike the previous two systems, this is the only one that works in the presence of oxygen and is the main energy system for prolonged periods of exercise lasting longer than 2 minutes. And it has three main sections: the glycolysis, similar to the glycolytic system, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. And all three of these sections produce energy in the form of ATP. However, this section is not used much in tennis, and the main energy system present in tennis is the ATP-PC system. And the reason for this is because most tennis rallies last on about 4 to 10 seconds. Therefore, you're only using one energy system, and then there's an interval or a break between each rally. So it's very rare that there's a continuous period of exercise, despite the fact that the games last for sometimes 2 hours or maybe even 3. It's only the ATP-PC system and sometimes the glycolytic system for extended rallies that are in use during tennis. So it's recommended that tennis players have a predominantly carbohydrate diet with a average caloric intake of about 2,500 to 3,500 calories per day. And from your 3-day food diary, it was calculated that your average intake of calories varied from about 2,900 at its lowest to 3,600 at its highest. So over the 3 days, you averaged out inside the recommendations for that. And from this, your resting metabolic rate was calculated using the Harris-Benedict equation, and that equated out at about 1,800 calories per day. We were also able to work out in relation to your physical activity levels, your energy expenditure for each day, and obviously with you taking part in activities and tennis for up to 8 to 10 hours a week, you're considered highly active, and therefore your energy expenditure was about 3,646 calories per day. And this was also furthered by your energy expenditure during training sessions, which was about 2,396 calories.
To analyse the diet, what we did was split the foods down into two categories. These were macronutrients and micronutrients. Macronutrients make up the majority of your daily intake, and these are your carbohydrates, your fats, and your proteins. And micronutrients are basically your vitamins and minerals. So, across the 3 days, the daily calorie intake ranged from 2,900 roughly to approximately 3,600 calories. And this worked out an average over the 3 days at just short of 3,250 calories, which is between, for a tennis player, the recommended of range is between 2,500 to 3,500. So you're sitting right in the middle of that range, which is good. This can be seen in the chart, which should just be going on now. As you can see, on the first day the calories are slightly higher, and what is interesting, what we found is that the day one, which is where the calories were higher, actually had the lowest content of carbohydrates and protein. Now the breakdown of this highlighted that that day had the highest amount of fat. Now, because of fat containing more calories per gram, this can explain it. And on that day, a particular highlight was the chips and burger for tea, which is full of hydrogenated fat, meaning that increased the calories that day. Other than that, they were very steady. We took an average of your daily intake across the week and compared that to the government guidelines, and what we found was in carbohydrates, fats and proteins, you're consuming significantly higher than the guidelines suggest. But we are aware that taking part in a sport, training and performing, you're going to be expending more calories per day. So we looked at the ACSM guidelines for an endurance athlete, and found that with carbs you're taking on the right amount of carbs, and protein is slightly higher, but in fact that's a good thing, because as a tennis player it's not just an endurance sport. What we found when we were looking at the micronutrients is that in each case you're under consuming quite significantly. In the case of zinc and vitamin B6, you're less than half the recommended amount of consumption. This means a lack of zinc could lead to feeling more lethargic and an increased amount of headaches. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the macronutrients, so carbohydrates, fats and proteins. Carbohydrates are your main source of energy, especially for a tennis player. This is what's used as a fuel for when you're taking part in exercise that lasts a little bit longer, and especially more intense exercise. It's stored as glycogen, and this is stored in the liver and in the muscles. Now, when you eat simple carbohydrates, such as sugars, this increases your blood sugar level quite significantly and rapidly, but also drops very drastically. So foods with a lower glycemic index, such as pasta, this releases glycogen a lot slower into the body, and provides a better fuel for your training or performance. Proteins are made up of essential and non-essential amino acids. Now during exercise, amino acids are broken down, and it is protein that is used to maintain, grow and repair body tissue. Fats, or more commonly known as lipids, are made up of different kinds of fats. So you've got saturated fats, which are most commonly solid, such as dairy, meat. You've got unsaturated fats, which are made up of monosaturates, which are generally like your olive oil, vegetable oil, things like that, and trans fats, which are the bad ones, the ones to avoid. These are commonly known as hydrogenated fats and are in your fried food, crisps, things that are basically fried in oil. Um, you've also got polysaturates, which again are like your vegetable oils, but slightly better. Things as sesame oil, sunflower oil. These are stored subcutaneously, so under the skin, in muscles, and in adipose tissue, which is just connective tissue, and fat often comes across as just loose tissue in the body. Fat is your main source of energy when the body's at rest or in low intensity exercise.
Right, so this section is your daily dietary intake recommendations. So, looked at your diet, and I'm going to state what you obtained, your scores, what grams or kilograms you got for your micro and macronutrients, and what percentage it is for your daily energy. Okay, and I'm also going to make some further recommendations and suggestions on what you need to do to optimize your performance. Right, so firstly, it's noticeable to point out that your diet is very inconsistent from the 3-day plan that you showed us. So we had, I think it was carbohydrates and fats that varied greatly. Okay, so for analysis purposes, we just used the total week score, the mean score of your 3 days combined. Okay, so firstly, we're going to look at carbohydrates. So your carbohydrate score was 49% of your daily energy, and it worked out at 415 grams you took on average. Okay, so we're going to relate that back to the ACSN guidelines, and which state that between 50-60% of carbohydrates should be your daily energy intake. This is for an endurance athlete just like yourself. So we can, as we can see, it's a little bit under. So we need to push it up. If we get it up, then we're going to have a lot more energy for, I know you've got a busy training schedule, you train 3 to 5 times a week. I think it's roughly around 10 hours, that's how long you're doing, how much you're doing a week. And also you've got competition on top of that, so you've got quite a busy training schedule. If you up your carbs and make that your main source of fuel for your day, then you're going to have a lot more energy when you're playing. Also, a suggestion is, which you could be interested in, is carb loading. Carb loading, basically, in a brief term, just have loads of carbs 3 days before competition, and that's going to give about more energy in your muscles, ready to be used as glycogen stored in your muscles, and it's going to be easier for it to access and easier for it to use in the competition. Secondly, is your fats. Your fats scored with 30% of your daily energy intake, and saturated fats was 10%. So again, ACSM guidelines show that fats should be under 30% and saturated fats should be under 10%. So you're basically on par here. But as an athlete, endurance, a tennis player, a lot of endurance, your games last for, well, it could be over an hour and a half, etc. And also training, you need to cut these fats down. Okay, so the less fats, the less body fat you've got, and the less fat placed in your arteries, you can get more blood flow, more to the muscles, and hopefully aid a better performance. Next, we're going to look at your proteins. Your proteins are pretty stable. You average around 101 grams of protein a day, which, if we look at the protein intake calculation, we would do your body weight, which is 72, times by an endurance athlete, which would be 1.4 grams of protein, 1.4 grams a kilogram of protein. Times that together, we get 111, which shows that you're 10 grams over, but that's fine. Okay, nothing to do about that. Obviously, when you're exercising as well, protein gets broken down, and also you need a lot of protein for recovery. Right, next we're going to look at your macronutrients. Your macronutrients show quite a lot of deficiencies. Okay, so things like calcium, iron, potassium, vitamin C, vitamin A, all of them all weren't on the recommended daily intake. Okay, everything was under, quite significantly under, apart from vitamin C. Vitamin C showed you to take a lot more. Okay, so if we're gonna, well, it's not a big issue because you're still taking micronutrients. That's the main thing. But if it stayed the same and we kept on lacking in micronutrients, you could see a spike in performance because your immune system is a bit deficient. Okay, so to conclude, right, we go. To conclude, if you maintain your calories, which is a good amount of calories for a tennis player, you need to aim to make your diet consistent. Okay, carbohydrates up to 60%, reduce fats, keep them the same most days. Okay, and also keep your proteins the same. Okay, and that is all. Thank you.